Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Today. I feel super fortunate today to have a good buddy here with me and a really wonderful guy, Billy Wagner from Brightway Insurance. Billy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Wally. So happy to be with you today.
You know, Billy, I think we're like-minded in quite a few ways. One of them is we're not that interested in what people do until we have a comfort with who they are. So I'd like to share with people who you are. And a couple of questions come to my mind. I know some of the answers, or at least superficially. Big Brothers. How'd you get started? Why is that so special to you?
Yeah, I was actually listening to the radio one day and heard that there was a 3-year waiting list for littles in that Big Brother, Little Brother program, and it just kind of pulled at me. I always wanted to mentor and help people, and I learned a lot through life, and I always wanted to kind of share that back. And so I got called and just started doing the research and got paired with somebody, it was 13 years ago, actually yesterday. And it was one of the most impactful things.
We call that an anniversary or a birthday between a big and little brother?
Yeah, it's an anniversary. And the things that little guy has accomplished is pretty amazing with the obstacles he's had. And it was a 10-year thing, so I started with him when he was 8 years old, and we took it all the way till he was 18 when the program ends, and now we still stay connected and talk, every other month.
So that little guy, 13 years later, he's not an 8-year-old, he's a 21-year-old man.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got a great job in Mayport on the base. He's got a steady girlfriend. He's looking for transportation, and he's, like I said, it's super awesome to kind of see that transformation with him, throughout his life.
The pairing is really neat, as you're likely aware. I'm very, very involved with Best Buddies. And it's a similar thought, where you create friendships and mentorships, in this case with people with disabilities, in the case of Big Brothers and or Big Sisters, with young people who their disability is the situation into which they were born more often than not the way that they were born. So it's really rewarding. I'm grateful that you do that. Let's talk about great things in the community with adults and in business as a Rotarian. What drew you there?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to make an impact in the community, and I started trying to figure that out, locally in the community, and started asking people. And there was a lot of folks that were doing great things in Rotary, and I just started doing more research, started asking questions, and we are blessed to have one of the greatest clubs in the world, really, in Ponte Vedra, in our neighborhood there. And it's 140 of some of the brightest people, business professionals, attorneys, politicians. I mean, just really the whole gamut. So if you wanted to learn from somebody, these are people that charge $400 or $500 an hour for their time, and you've got them right there, and the ability to kind of make an impact in the community, and it touches so many people. And whatever you're really interested in is where you can pour in. And so I've been a member of that club for 11 years. I was the president of that club 3 years ago, and one of the most impactful years of my life was leading that club, seeing the impact, forming those wonderful relationships, some of my closest friends, and really just seeing everything that thing does from under the hood is pretty special.
What I hear from you, Billy, is consistency. For people looking to create relationships in commercial real estate or commercial insurance or whatever that is professionally, 13 years with Big Brothers, 11 years in the Rotary, that's in it for the long haul. It's not a jump in, hi, here's my card, what can we do for business? It's what can we do in the community? What can we do for others? And then from that, you bond relationships with fabulous people who happen to be in businesses that are collaborative or ancillary to your core interests. That's great.
And I'm very careful with my time before I make a commitment to anything. I really do my research because I want to make sure it fits my core values. And if it fits my core values, then I'm going to stick with it and stay with it. And also always walked into those relationships, those organizations, trying to help others. And if I focus on that, the relationships just automatically happen.
It plays nice, yeah. Don't be selfish and you get more than you gave.
That's right.
How it usually plays out. So 15 years as owning an insurance brokerage with Brightway, that's fantastic. And then about a decade as general managers in restaurants. I cannot think of a more difficult job, a more difficult career than working restaurants. How did you get into hospitality, and what caused you to get out?
Yeah, thank you. It is a very difficult industry. So when I was in college at UCF, my first job was as a busboy, and I just worked my way up. After 2 weeks, I promoted me to a server, then a bartender, then a head server, and then, as I was going to school, they just kept promoting me. And when I was 21 years old, I was the youngest general manager in their history, and I was, managing 65, 70 people, and, couple of $1 million in revenue, and really learned a lot as I was going through college. And, it kind of just happened, you kind of you're there, and it just kind of happens. And such a cool learning experience, how to balance a P&L. I hired thousands of people, had to unfortunately let go of hundreds. And it's such a rewarding thing to learn. And when you're happiest in life, when you're growing, and man, did I grow in that industry. It was a lot of fun, but also very difficult. The HR side of it was challenging. Staffing was very challenging. The margins were very small, so that was a challenge. And so I did it for 10 years, and I was promoted several times. I was probably 2 steps from the president of that company, and it was just too much. It was weekends. It was holidays. It was a lot of stress, a lot of mental energy.
It's just all consuming. I'm grateful every time I go out to eat. I like to think I tip well. I'm courteous to everyone, partially because I'm so grateful that I do not work in the restaurant industry.
Yeah, so it was fun, but I also realized, again, I've tried to plan my life out, and I wanted to have, family time and weekends off, and so a lot of my managers that worked for me went into the insurance business, and that's how I kind of got started in that realm, just from, again, talking to people and trying to understand different side of the business. But it was a wonderful stepping stone for me.
I think it's important for folks to understand that those pieces of background, so when they are having an insurance conversation, they're not having a conversation in a vacuum. You've made payroll, you've read P&Ls, you've got a total understanding, probably made a lot of insurance claims through the times running the restaurants and doing those other things, both from every aspect of insurance. You feel the pain.
Absolutely.
You know the pain.
Yeah.
For people who are, what I really want to accomplish, Billy, in our conversation is I want to be helpful to commercial real estate agents who are attempting to understand how to have insurance conversations with their clients, whether they're buyers of buildings, sellers of buildings, buyers or sellers of businesses. The insurance is a critical thread in all that, critical thread. And the team of people required to buy and sell a business, buy and sell a building, lease, rent businesses, and how insurance plays into that. Having team members who are expert in that is critical to the success of that real estate agent. What are some things that you often see that get overlooked? Let's agree that everyone would say, okay, if I'm buying a building, the lender's going to drive some aspect of the insurance on the building. Got it. What are some typical things that can be very, very important to the business owner that the agent could guide, not the insurance agent, but rather the real estate agent is saying, let me introduce you to someone who can help and guide you through some of these other insurances. What are some typical coverages that you see people suddenly find themselves in a bind and go, I'm not covered for that? Give me some examples.
Yeah, so like you had mentioned, I think partnerships are really important to have experts around you that can guide those discussions. But I also think it's really important.
I'm always nervous if I'm the smartest guy in the room right. on a topic that isn't building inspection. If it's right. something else, I'm like, I'm a little nervous if this. Yeah. If I know something this guy doesn't know, do I need him on my team?
Right, and I think for commercial real estate agents, they really should understand how to kind of make people aware of things that may happen, right? So asking really good questions. And, most people think about insurance as like it's kind of a pain. I got to pay this, and it's annually, and it always goes up. And
interest, insurance, and taxes drives me crazy.
And no one, I'm never going to have a problem, or that's how you think about it until you have a claim, and then you want the most ironclad, greatest policy with greatest customer service you possibly can get. So most times, the biggest difficulty is the property side of the insurance, algorithm, and especially we're in a very hard market right now. So the property side is, what you do for a living and making sure that the inspections are good and the roof and all those things are in good order is always a challenge to getting insurance. So understanding that piece, I think, is really important. I think from a coverage standpoint, liability to me is the most important thing. It's something that can take away all your future hopes and dreams. You work really hard to build a business, and it can all come crumbling down very quickly. And so the liability side of insurance is not very expensive, and it's just making sure that you have the right amount.
Liability against what peril specifically?
Right.
Comes to your mind?
So just slip and falls, products and completed operations, something doesn't, go out the way that you want it to go out, and you're responsible for that. So anytime somebody gets an attorney and tries to sue you for whatever reason, you need to make sure you have protection for that. So, the property and the liability are really critical. A lot of times with standard businesses, they can get what's called a BOP, which kind of is a package policy that kind of incorporates a lot of things.
What does that stand for?
Business operating policy. So it's basically a policy that encapsulates everything that they kind of need as a bundle. How
does a BOP differ from an umbrella?
Okay, so an umbrella is something that goes over everything that you currently have. Okay. So it's kind of an extra layer of protection. So when your liability is exhausted, somebody sues you and your liability limits, let's say they are $1 million on your business, those are exhausted because it's 1.5 million is the lawsuit, then the umbrella then kicks in when that liability on your base policy is exhausted for the additional $500,000.
Does the umbrella protect me personally or professionally? And same with the BOP.
Yeah.
Do they go hand in hand?
Yeah, great question. So typically you need a liability umbrella for your business separately. And then on the personal side, you need one personally. So myself, I have a home, auto, boat, and an umbrella that covers all my personal. And then on the business side, I have a BOP policy, I have workers' comp, and I have all that, and then I have an umbrella for my business. So they're two separate entities.
Critters.
Yeah, because they're two separate entities. Like if they're suing you, they're suing your business, and if they're suing you personally, that's really kind of the biggest liability is driving around your car, those kind of things covers you personally.
So would the BOP protect specific activities and the umbrella protects overages?
Yes, 100%, yeah. So an example of a BOP would be like your property coverage is included. If liability is also included. If somebody uses your car as part of the business, you can add an endorsement where they can drive your car, it's included. Your signage is included. So those things are kind of packaged into that. Another thing, too, that has kind of recently been a big problem is cyber liability. So, you're exposed there. If you have access to data or all that stuff, you can definitely be sued for that. And so that's something that's missing in a lot of people's insurance portfolios.
Likely inexpensive, I'm guessing.
Yes, it is. It is likely inexpensive, but it is increasing in cost because there is, things are happening. There's companies that have paid lots of money out, millions of dollars on.
Would that type policy also cover being held hostage?
No, that would be.
I don't mean physical hostage.
Oh, like ransom of your business.
Ransom of your business data.
Some do and some do not. So you have to kind of make sure which one yours covers. Yeah.
That's a hard decision, a group of decisions really, because you can't know what you don't know. You're also limited by the players you play with. So if I go to my insurance guy who's in the building next to me and I ask him for coverage, he can only offer me what he's aware of.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous risk in not playing with high-end professionals where they cannot protect you against what they don't know or what they don't offer.
Right.
That's always a fear place for me in my own businesses.
Yeah, and it's a really important point, and I think a lot of folks don't really understand the back end of it and how that works. And so there's, locally in town, there's some wonderful agencies that have great options, but every agency is a little bit different. Some contracts that they get to offer coverages are limited to them. And so the three other people that you may have a relationship with you're missing out on that option because this guy has a relationship with it, and you don't know it.
Right.
And
that was really my point.
Yeah. And it's
frustrating.
It could be twice as much coverage for half the cost, but you aren't aware of it. And so that's why it is kind of important to understand and asking your broker or person you work with those questions, like how many options are out there that you don't have access to it, and why don't you? And what is some of your favorite companies that you work with, and why? Just you have to be your own advocate a lot. And unfortunately, if you work with the right professional, it could be very good advice, but you also have to be your own advocate. And the people that have the most successful in life are ask great questions. That's why you've done well. You're really good at that.
I say all the time, the key to life is not the right answers, it's the right questions. Because if we've got the right question, even if we accept the wrong answer, we'll discover the answer was wrong and then restart and get back on. Nothing is worse than having the wrong question and being unaware it's the wrong question and getting a right answer to the wrong question, and you end up in some corner. You're like, how on God's green earth did I end up here? And it was usually with the wrong question.
Yeah, I remember like when the world started slowing down a little bit for me, when I was able to leapfrog other people, was when I figured out how to find mentors, how to ask the right questions to those mentors, and how to get that information out of people, because it's in there. Like there's like you have so much to offer people, but it's like if I don't know to ask you that question, I will not know. You
read the book yet? Who, Not How?
No, I have heard of it.
Get that on your short list, Billy Wagner.
Yeah.
Who, Not How.
Okay.
We spend so much time working to acquire more skills and acquire more talents when actually there's someone who already has that skill or that talent at a level higher than we would ever attain if we start today working on it. So who, not how.
Yeah, that's
who,
great.
Not how.
That's
good
great
stuff. Talk to me about the difference between me shopping my insurance with a broker versus shopping with a captive agent.
Yeah.
And first, what those two things mean.
Sure, that's a great question. And so there's a lot of captive agents locally that are wonderful people.
And what does that mean, captive agent?
Captive basically means they're captive to one company. So, for example, that is like a State Farm, right? So and State Farm's a great company. They do great with claims, but unfortunately, when somebody is looking at a risk, there's about 50 different characteristics. There's a bunch of different things that drive what's the best decision. And maybe that you call that captive agent and he has that right risk and it could be perfect for you. And a lot of times we tell you that that's a good one, take that. But I don't think it's a smart business move to only look at a captive and not a broker. You need to look at both. I think it's important to look at both. The more options and choices you have, the better decision you're going to make. So a captive, unfortunately, only has one set of underwriting, one set of rules, and if it's a no, it's a no, and there's no wiggle room, right? They can't move to a different option. So a captive is basically, it's like going to the vanilla ice cream store. Like, I'm going to get vanilla there. If I like vanilla, that's perfect. But really, you just have to kind of know that you should be checking. And a broker, that is different in the sense that they have a lot of different options, and they represent you as the consumer. So they're saying, okay, Wally, with your situation, here's all the factors. I'm going to look at 12 or 20 or 30 different options, and let's find out what the best one is. And that's really important to understand, because if you start asking questions on, okay, well, who will take this or who will take that, a lot of times it's not a yes or no answer. It's an eligibility answer. It's not a rating factor. It's this company will take it and they charge this rate, but we got to figure out who will take it. So it's more of like you need somebody that is an expert that can navigate that for you to get a good outcome.
I've been involved now in over 40,000 real estate transactions, and I've seen a lot of them go south because the real estate agent didn't have broad enough relationships with insurance agents, and a singular agent, that is, insurance agent, came back and said, this specific property in this specific condition is not insurable. Well, it's insurable. It just wasn't insurable in the context of what they had to offer. And I've seen a lot of things go south. I've seen a lot of, frankly, unnecessary repairs done, where had they gone in another direction, they would have had more options. They may still have chose to do the repair, or they may still have chose to not proceed with that transaction, but it would have been from a position of choice, not restriction.
Yeah, 100%. I like to say sometimes that we can write a building that's on fire, really. I mean, but you just have to kind of, again, know that there's an option and it's going to be this option and that's the only one. So typically when we look at a risk, we might start with like 50 options. That's very unusual, but we have like 50 options. And the more hair that's on that risk.
But I don't want you to present 50 options to me.
Definitely not. We want to make things simple.
At most 2 or 3.
Yes.
Good, better, best, or here's the pros and cons here, pros and cons here, pros and cons here.
Right.
Sometimes you have a choice of 3 imperfect choices, and then I want to be able to decide based on your input which of the imperfect choices am I most comfortable with the imperfections.
Yeah, I mean, I want to do better than that. I want it to be Amazon easy for you. Like, hey, this is what I want. I can see and understand it just like that quick, and that's what it takes a little while. But I guess I need the consumers or the agents to understand that those options are just getting ticked off, but it doesn't mean that it's a no. Right. But it is a no if you might even call like 2 or 3 other brokers, and here's the other challenge. Like that broker may have to have a certain commitment with that carrier, so then they end up having to push business that way when it may not be their best interest. And that happens a lot because in order to keep that contract, they got to keep that carrier happy. Where if you've got a lot of volume coming in, it usually is a little bit better because you can spread that risk out and have more options for your consumers.
How do carriers rate agents/brokers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of metrics they look at. So they look at like the opportunity cost in working with them. They look at like how many times do they send business in, and how many times they actually get something that's bindable. There's also, to be honest, like this is something that also commercial real estate agents need to understand is that commercial insurance is in the typewriter age. That's how far behind it is technology-wise. So if I'm submitting a risk, there's something called top of the stack submission, which means I have everything perfectly the way that they need it. And unfortunately, it's very archaic. It's like paper documents that have to manually be filled out and submitted. And so if carriers are looking at who gives them top of the deck submissions, again, everyone's looking at time. How long does everything take, right? Yeah. So the commercial world is not automated at all. It's very behind. Hopefully it catches up. The personal line side has caught up, but the commercial side has not. So everything has to be submitted. And not only that, a lot of the business, and this is a whole rabbit hole, but a lot of other business has to be submitted to what we call MGA, which is a managing general agency, which is almost like a broker for a broker. So then it gets even more diluted as far as like how long, and that has to be submitted that way.
So let me ask you this then, Bill. Within a given brand, pick any brand you want. You can pick Brightway if you want, or brand X. Mm-hmm. Different agents within that brand will have different relationships, different ratings, and abilities to do different things. They're not all created equal, even living under the same flag. Is that reasonably correct?
100% true. And honestly, like commercial insurance, you really need somebody experienced. If somebody says, I've been doing commercial insurance, I'm just getting started in that, you need to be cautious about that because experience matters and they have developed these relationships. So I might submit a risk to this MGA, right? And they know me, and that risk gets turned around very quickly, and they give me some different offerings that you don't get. So relationships matter, and experience matters, particularly with commercial.
And experience does not occur on the calendar. Experience occurs in numbers of events.
Yeah.
That one drives me crazy. You know, we've been in the inspection space for more than 25 years. Well, that's a long time on the calendar. But there's 40,000 events in there where there's someone else that may have been hanging out part-time, did 2 or 3 a year, got the same 25 plus years. They got 100 events rather than 40,000 events. I'm sure in the insurance space, you deal with that same thing.
Yeah, we've talked about that. We've talked about that before. It's like in the trenches, what happens. I mean, the amount of volume that we do in a year is like 5 years of experience for most other insurance agents. The more you do, the more you're going to, there's nothing we haven't seen, you know, and there's something about that.
Every time I say that, one of my longtime sayings is, nothing changes except the name and address.
Right.
And then lo and behold, the day after I say that, some other weird thing comes into the office. I'm like, my gracious, I could never have invented this. How did this occur?
Yeah.
So
that is true.
It happens seemingly less frequently, but back to it, it's about numbers of events. Mm-hmm. You know, we're doing thousands of events every year. That's plenty of opportunities for some new craziness to appear, often from the legislature, quite frankly.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
Talk to me about flood insurance as it relates to the commercial building owner, specifically in Florida.
Yeah.
Should have it, shouldn't have it?
Yeah.
You go first, and I'll give you my position.
Sure. So, I, to me, flood is what keeps me up at night as an agent. Like that is probably
Why?
because we're in Florida where it's completely flat. We're surrounded by water and we're prone to hurricanes. And most people will tell you, oh, you're not in a flood zone. And
Oh, that drives me nuts.
yes,
Everyone in Florida is in a flood zone. The question is, which flood zone are you in?
correct. And it's one of those things where, and a lot of commercial real estate agents and residential real estate say this all the time, and be careful because that's your E&O insurance on the line. You don't tell somebody they're not in a flood zone.
Beyond
So-
the insurance, Billy, it's
Yeah.
their reputation. It's their, have I done all that can reasonably be done to guide this particular customer to the safest positions they can be in? And if not, guide them to the safest position, have them understand the position that they chose to be in.
Right.
Nothing's worse than somebody calling with a problem going, but I thought, well, you thought wrong. And my agent said, well, they too were wrong. Those are very uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah. And so what I tell my agents is when they're talking to people, I don't care if they buy the flood insurance or not. I just want them to understand it. I want them to know the risks. I want them to know the exposure. And really, like the risk of a fire on a building is like in a 30-year period is like 3%.
Yep.
The risk of a flood is at least 25%,
25%.
even in the low risk areas.
The majority of flood claims are paid to people who are not in the mandatory flood insurance position.
Right.
We read the same things, and that just drives me insane. But we can never have that conversation too often, because each time we have that conversation, Billy, somebody different is listening. And it causes someone different to pause and reconsider what they may have been told, which is often, if not incorrect, ultimately not in their best interest. And that pains me.
I would rather the client say something like, hey, look, I'm trying to save money. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Yeah. And I may tell them, look, you can save money here, maybe with a higher deductible or something different where it doesn't cause, a couple inches of water could be $50,000 to $100,000 in no time. Yeah. So just understanding what risks you're truly taking, then I feel comfortable as long as they get it, they understand it. And, flood insurance, like I said, when we get a storm, what's going to happen is there's a lot of confusion about, okay, this is the hurricane damage, this is the flood damage, and what you want is both coverages, and you want the insurance companies fighting over which is going to
fight what pile of the money comes from.
Right.
Yeah, they can subrogate, they can do whatever they want to do. Just send me my money.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. And if it turns out it's overlapping, that's okay. Did the water come from the ground? Did it come from the sky? I got water, and I need $30,000. You two fight over it. Yeah. And often it's fighting within the same division.
Right.
Or same entity.
Right.
That makes it better.
Yeah. Generally what happens is, and I've been a part of some, even in Matthew, we had a lot of flood claims. And what happens is they draw a line on the building. So like in New Orleans, when, they had the big flood there was all these lines on the building. People were like, what are those lines? Well, those lines are saying this is where the water rose to. Everything below that is flood. Everything above it is hurricane coverage. And people did not understand that. And so, it doesn't, and actually flood costs have gone down. It's one of the only insurances that have gone down, because what's happened is competition has come into that space where it used to all be run by the government through FEMA, which is almost bankrupt, and they keep having to rescue it. But private flood has come in and picked certain pockets of it, not with a lot of exposure, but has driven the price down because there's more options.
Not the price of the National Flood Insurance Program, but the options.
Yeah, the private options.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, I just didn't want anyone thinking, oh my, there's negotiation in the National Flood Insurance Program.
That will never go down.
That's fixed rate. There's no matter which carrier's door you came in to write it for you, it does not impact the rate.
Yeah.
And there are people who don't tell the truth on that.
Yeah. And that's it. That's another thing too, is like with like a captive agent, they have a flood program, but that flood program is probably through the National Flood Service, right? And so private options, again, there, just making sure that you've looked, because it used to be that the price is this much on flood and there's no deviating from it. It is, you can call 100 people and it'll be the same. That's not true any longer. It's, there's probably 15 or 20 options where there used to be just the one. And so with those options, you just need to make sure that there's people checking those. And that makes a lot of sense to do your due diligence there, because it can range wildly.
Yeah. People in shared space, that is office condos, buildings like we're in a pretty good sized building, probably 80 or 100,000 feet, lots of different tenants. How do you work with or advise a tenant, a business owner who is a tenant, as opposed to a business owner who owns the building?
Yeah, so you can get basically a different tenant coverage inside, and a lot of times it'll cover kind of almost like a condo does. It'll cover like the drywall in, it'll cover all your furniture, your equipment, and those kind of things. So there's definitely different policies that you can get there. Most times it's required by the landlord or the owner. And those are relatively inexpensive. I mean, I think I have as much coverage as I could possibly get in mine. I own a condo unit inside of a building, and I think I might pay $1,800 a year. And like I said, I also have actually one coverage I didn't mention earlier, which I think is really important, is EPLI coverage, employment liability coverage, especially with people trying to make all these decisions on how they're going to handle COVID, and people get sued a lot as business owners on whether they're working correctly. So having coverage for that is another important thing that a lot of people don't think to ask about it, and a lot of companies don't automatically include it. But if you go to the right person, ask the right question, you can get it included in a package.
And included is always less expensive than standalone.
Correct.
Generally speaking.
Yes.
That's good stuff. It's very, very common in my observation, and you have lots of observations, but from a slightly different perspective. It's very common for a landlord to impose upon a tenant or demand of a tenant, require of a tenant, a particular type of coverage for the tenant. It's relatively rare that I ever hear of or observe a tenant asking a landlord about what they've got covered. Talk about that symbiotic relationship. Is it appropriate for me as a tenant to ask the landlord, hey, can I see what you've got? Because if there's a problem, what's going to get that building back up and running again? What's going to solve that blown off roof or the flood or whatever it is I'm not alone. As a tenant, I'm in business with that landlord to get my business back rolling again as he gets his business going again.
Yeah.
Talk to me about how to have that conversation, or is that conversation even appropriate?
No, it is, and that's a great question. And I think asking the right questions to those folks that are, if you're renting from somebody else, typically at least annually looking at what they have and asking questions like, what happens if a hurricane comes? What am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? And a lot of times some of those costs are embedded in your CAM fees, and you have the right to ask what those are and how much they are and how much it's been shopped. Because sometimes the landlord will just let that sit and not shop it because he's just passing on those costs to somebody else. And so it's important from a economic standpoint, but also just understanding kind of playing I like to say playing the movie out. Like, what happens if this happens? And, just like you said, I think that's very appropriate. And I think you can ask for a copy of it and just start asking some questions on some common scenarios.
Would that be something I would do as the individual tenant, or would that be something I ask my broker to do, that is insurance broker? My insurance say, hey, I'm in this building. Can you make this request and review this and help me fill in the gaps? Where does that conversation usually originate?
Yeah, I think you could go both down those paths. I think it depends on, I think you may have to ask for the documents from your landlord directly. And I think it's appropriate to ask your expert that you're working with, because you may not know the right questions to ask. So absolutely.
Back to the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think you can go either path.
Where am I exposed? Here's the policy I've got. Here's the policy my landlord's got. Or it could be vice versa, right? I'm the landlord. What have you got? Or are we covered?
Yeah.
Each covering the other. Because if I'm the landlord and my tenant can't be made whole, he likely can't pay his rent. So it's symbiotic. They got to work together.
No doubt.
They got to work together. What's fun? What's fun, Billy? What's fun when you're not involved in Big Brothers, you're not taking care of Rotary and some responsibility, you're not taking care of the dozens of people who are employed in your agency? What's fun? How do you wind down?
Oh, I love that question. And I think I spent a lot of time, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, trying to really pay a lot of attention about family. I think family is the most important thing. I've probably coached 40 different youth sports teams with my kids. I'm very involved. Like every week, I alternate my son and my daughter on Saturday mornings at 9, and we have a daddy-son date.
Very nice.
We just last year bought a pandemic purchase of a boat. I know we share that love of the water, and I look at my kids are 12 and 13, so I've probably got a couple of years left, only because when they start getting older, they stop caring.
Cool?
I'm a little bit cool, but I'm losing it very quickly.
Right on the fringe of not being cool.
Very, very close. And so, I'm very involved with, like I said, the sports and helping them in that world. And, for us going out on the boat, just spending quality time together. And, we do a weekly meeting as a family every week on Sunday night. And it's one of the best things we ever did. It's about bringing harmony into your family life, and it's Robert's rules, and each person takes their turn running the meeting, and we talk about what we're going to do that's fun this week, that doesn't cost any money, and what are we going to have for dinner this week, so we don't ask that same question every night. What's for dinner? What are we eating? And we realize 20 minutes before we try to scramble something together. We plan that out as a family.
Your kids are hungry again today?
Yes.
We fed you yesterday.
Exactly. So we also bring up issues and opportunities as things happen. So instead of getting mad and your tempers flare when they leave their socks on the floor, you put it on the meeting agenda, and they do the same thing, and collaboratively we come up with a solution together. Super impactful as far as will they follow it. Like some of the ideas they come up with to solve some of our family dynamic issues are pretty amazing. So I'm just poured deeply into the family. I'm deeply involved in trying to see impact in the community. So I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. In fact, I just started my own Wagner Family Foundation, which will be taking grant applications once a year from the community in lower served areas, trying to give back. This community has been so wonderful for us that I'm just looking for ways to kind of give back to it. So just being aware, just trying to make the world a better place, trying to help the people that are around me and in my inner circle. If I focus on making sure that my team and my family and my friends win at life, I'm always happiest, and everything else works out. I don't have to worry about anything else.
So, Billy, for folks who'd like to extend this conversation and go a little bit deeper, whether it's with things you're doing in philanthropy, things you're doing in insurance, or just have that get to know you conversation, what's the best way to reach out to you? Like LinkedIn, what's right for you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm active there. You can, search Brightway Insurance of Ponte Vedra Beach, and you can find us there. I'm very easy to get a hold of, and happy to, to me, relationships are, again, one of the most important things, one of my core values. And if I can help you, that'll be the best thing for me. Like I love to be able to help people. So if there's something I can do to pour into somebody or give them advice, and I have a lot of expensive experience learning things the hard way. So.
Giver's gain. That's not a Rotary, but it's close. You get the idea.
Absolutely.
BNI there. Well, Billy, thank you so much for spending time with us. I want to thank Billy Wagner for carving some time out of his schedule, both personal and professional. Very interesting guy, fun guy, high integrity guy to spend time with. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Wally. I appreciate it.